So I've got two luminaries, that's what I'm going to call them. These folks have been within what used to be called Resolution Marketing, and now Blueprint X, ANZ, for a number of years. Mina came to us, an already certified Marketo certified expert through his work at News Corp. And John Louis has been with us for 10 years, which worries me because long service leave happened in Australia around that time. So we should talk. And the best way to describe JL, because most of you won't have seen him, he's not a consultant. The best way to describe John Louis and his team is that well, millions of emails every day are sent out using the templates that JL and his team have created, either emails or landing pages. Today he's going to talk about forms in a book, a bit more detail. Quick 10 seconds on us. We're focused very much on the technology here today, but we look at a Marketo implementation, a marketing automation implementation across 5 different pillars, being people and process, data and content being the other pillars that we're looking at. And we're spending a lot of time these days, not only with the technology, of course, but also in data integrations. The other 5 seconds was to describe the size of the organization that we are now. As part of Blueprint X, which is headquartered out of the UK, we've got offices all around the world and customers in 34, probably a few more now. Need to upgrade that slide. And here locally in Australia and New Zealand, when we were under the guise of RMS, Resolution Marketing, who most of you would remember us as, I suspect. We won Partner of the Year award about this time last year. So lots of experience, and going back to why the forgotten functions, it's basically because Marketo is pretty big. It's and whilst we're living in it every day, we realize that a lot of people aren't. So it's quite easy to forget some of the functions that Marketo actually has, some of its features, some of which you may not be using for good reason. But sometimes it's nice just to pick up one little nugget of information, one useful piece of information to make your life easier once you've come out of this webinar. We've got, I think there was just over 100 registrants. So there's been quite a lot of people actually register for this webinar. We're not expecting everybody to be on the call today. So if you're listening to the recording, happy days, nice to see you as well. But most of the users we're finding are between that 1 to 4 year level. Those who are in the 5 years plus, congratulations. There's probably a bunch of things you're going to already know in here, but it's nice to be reminded of. And then there's a few newbies along the way as well. So it's the style of these forgotten functions not to do too much by way of slides, but first cab off the rank, and we're going to divide this into 2 today, is talking about velocity scripting. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask a poll here. So for those people, it's about 15 people in this webinar at the moment, I'm going to ask you a question, and hopefully you can see that pop up on your Zoom webinar thing. If you can just let us know, are you using velocity scripting already? So there's a few folks there. Hopefully you can see the results. Let me know if you can't. But there's a few folks there that are definitely not using it. There's a lot of people who are not using it there every day. And there's a couple of people who are saying, what's velocity scripting? So that gives us a bit of a clue as to the level of the audience here. So with that in mind, and someone's telling me that you can't see the results. That's fine. I'll share this afterwards. But basically, actually, what if I do that? Does that give you a clue? So there's one person who uses it every day. There's a few folks a little bit. And then what's the velocity scripting is behind that. So there's, and with that in mind, I'm now going to hand straight over to Mina and let him take over from here. Over to you, Mina. I'm going to unmute you, sir.
Oh, sorry. That's going to happen a lot with me. I'm so sorry. You should be able to see my screen now.
Certainly can.
What is velocity scripting used for?
Yep.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. Velocity scripting is probably one of the most underutilized functions inside of Marketo, primarily because it's hidden away outside of where you would normally see functions within database or in marketing activities. It lives inside programs, and because it only affects emails, which we'll go into a little bit shortly, it can often be overlooked for more, more solutions that are based on database segmentation rather than trying to script content differently. So what is it, first off? So it's a type of script that we implement inside of emails. It adds value by programmatically changing the content of an email based on script commands to suit specific details in the person record. So what that means is the script looks at the person's record, it checks against a specific amount of coding, or in this case, rules that we write up. If they fit any of those rules, it quickly morphs the content of the email to suit that person's record. When would we use it? If a segmentation rule is just simply too broad, or if the recorded data is not so customer friendly. So really good examples of that is some financial customers know that the contact is arrears in the account, but you can't really say that straight off to the customer. Instead, you may want to shift the language of the block of content within the email to say something a bit nicer. But in order to do that, you could use velocity scripting. Excuse me. It can also be used when the data is simply not stored against the record. So things like time and date, which are not record relevant, but they're more like system-based data, can be used to pivot different content. And we'll explore one of those today as well. The examples include companies as large as Uber, who change the content of their email based on the time of day because they have different opening hours for different contact centers. And companies that are very grassroots and very SMB focused with a B2C and a B2B customer base, where they're changing the stored dates of someone's inquiry time or their event time from the typical year, month, date, which Marketo logs, to a more customer-friendly and readable 30th of June 2020. How does it differ from dynamic content? Well, dynamic content inside of your email, inside of your emails, is based off segmentation rules. And often those segmentation rules, as you know, you max out at 20 in your instance. And so you have to invest quite a lot of thought into what 20 segmentation rules you will be using across the board, not just for one email. To build a segmentation rule just for sending out one email would be a waste of a rule. A velocity script, on the other hand, is not a giant investment and it doesn't lock up resources at the database level, unlike a segmentation rule. So where can it be found inside of your instance? First off, you probably know that tokens can be accessed both at a program level and at a folder level. So within the My Tokens tab of a program, you will find the ability to write a velocity script or an email script, but you can also build it at a folder level. And as you all probably know, when you build a token such as date token or an email script token at a folder level, it will cascade downwards into all the programs that live in that folder. Once you're inside My Tokens, you can see that there's an email script that I've circled in red sitting on the right-hand side of the page. Simply click and drag that into the central panel, and immediately you'll get an editor turning up. You need to rename the token into something memorable. Probably keep it short and also try to avoid putting spaces. Underscores or dashes are always best with any scripts. And if you're building inside of a program, it will be local only to that program, similar to any other type of token. If you build it at a folder level, it will cascade and become inherited, as you can see on my screen. Okay.
Actually, Mina, while you're there, and I'll encourage this if that's okay, unless you just want to keep talking and then answer questions at the end.
No,
we do have a question, which was, can we use velocity editors and integrate with Marketo?
Depending on whether that velocity editor can can integrate via the API, you should be able to integrate straight in. However, you would need to extract from Marketo what the individual ID is for that program and the ID for the script. I've personally, very honestly, I'll say to you, I've not done it before, but I anticipate that similar to most integrations that are dealing at a program level, you should be able to at the API. But if you have a question like that, I'm more than happy to take it to bigger brains than I have.
It's funny, we had this is an aside and I apologize, but we had this very discussion at our consultants day last week. I think what we're really saying is that Velocity scripting editor isn't particularly red hot. Is that what you would say inside of Marketo?
Yeah, it's probably underrepresented throughout the Marketo community. I know that there are stalwarts such as Sanford who have written extensively about it, but it can be immediately confusing once you open any of those articles, because often he's answering a question, a very specific and nuanced question from someone who's presenting that question to him. So it's already enveloped in a lot of context, but to just find it and to understand what it does, I guess this is what this session's more about.
Cool.
Okay. So we'll be exploring how velocity scripting looks in an instance of Marketo that is synchronized to a CRM. In this case, it's Marketo with Salesforce, but the same applies when you're dealing with Marketo and Dynamics. But a few things to remember about velocity scripting before we get into those examples. Velocity scripting is only possible on an email asset, and the reason for this is because the changes that the script does to the email content happen at the exact moment when the email exits Marketo. The platform, or in this case Marketo, does a quick look over its shoulder and compares the values stored against the contact and whether there are any changes in the email content required based on your commands or based on your rules. Now, this can't happen with a landing page in the same manner as pages load dynamically with a landing page. You can see they're refreshing a landing page, whereas an email is static as soon as it exits the platform. Hopefully that makes sense. So the first few things that we'll discuss is what it's doing. So data is being referenced by the script, and it can either be data that's native, so fields that are inside of Marketo. And if those fields are accessible to Marketo, then you could also read Salesforce or Dynamics, as well as custom objects you may have set up in your instance, assuming you can see those in Marketo. Some custom objects obviously are not in Marketo. So this editor looks very similar to this. Often when you create a new script, this will be empty. But on the side panel on the right, you'll be able to see there are standard items, mainly the lead one and the opportunity. The opportunity will be fed data based on your CRM, but any custom objects or any custom integrations you may have integrated into your Marketo or made visible to your Marketo will live under custom objects. We'll go into this a little bit deeper shortly. So on the left is where all the code or all the scripting is happening, whereas on the right is where all of the content is coming from, or all the rule sets are coming from. Okay, let's have a look at a few. So inside of this mock program that we've built inside of Marketo, you'll see that I've got a few tokens. I have business hours and postcodes, and I've also got a local token. So these two have been inherited but overwritten. I've made changes to them. And this one is only local to the program. In order to create a token, we drag in email script. We call it something like new script test. And inside of the editor, give it a few seconds to think about where it's drawing the information from. And all of these items are visible to the Marketo platform within itself. Now, this could be as short or as long as however many fields you've got native to Marketo. Opportunity, on the other hand, is drawing it directly from Salesforce in this case. When you click and drag something like the amount, you'll see that it automatically writes in how to find that item. And if those who are familiar with Excel will notice the $sign, there is some crossover in that this is locking onto that field set. One of the biggest things to remember in this editor is in order to utilize amount, for example, not only must you drag it in like I did, but you need to also checkbox to tell Marketo that it is able to open and view that table set. If you drag this in but don't have that checked, your script won't work. Okay. So let's have a look at a few examples of live scripts. So for this one, postcodes, we've said, look at the leads postcode. And if it is equal to 2000, then render this message. If the leads postcode is 3000, render this message, 4000, 7000, etc. And then we end the script. And in this case, if we go to lead and we look for postal code, we should make sure that postal code is checked. If it isn't, this script won't work, even though I've written it correctly in here. Let's have a look at it live. So this is an email using velocity script number 1, which is my.vs postcodes. And what you'll notice that I do is it's not enough to just view the editor or view the email preview. You really need to ensure with velocity scripting that you have a seed list to base your tests off. So in this case, what I've done is this seed group is each from different states. So this gentleman is from WA, and you'll notice that the velocity script has switched itself from being just the script to showing the content to do with Western Australia. Similarly, the next person, who is from Canberra, I think, says, do people from Canberra find QuestaCon exciting? Once again, if we move on to someone from Queensland, their postcode is 3000. When will Queensland reopen its borders with the other states? That's a little...
That's not going to stand the test of time of the recording, is it?
No, it won't happen. Yeah, so just context for everyone. It was COVID and Queensland was closing its borders and not opening them, just in case we need to clarify that later on. And as you can see, as I shift through the people on this seed list, each from a different state, we're seeing different content come up in the same area where the script is noted in the content. Okay. So that's an example of a relatively basic script that's just looking at recorded data against the contact and rendering a different message. Now, a couple of other use cases for such a script might be gendered greeting. So if you know that the database stores whether someone is male or female or undetermined, as in you don't have that information, you could easily say, well, say Mr. and use male pronouns for his, him in those areas of the email. Alternatively, you could say if you're sending an email out to a large cohort of people and that cohort of people is filled with contacts in a variety of different opportunity stages, you wouldn't need to write an email differently for each opportunity stage. You could render the content of that email based on the stage of opportunity, because that's logged against the contact record. The other example I was going to show you guys today is the business hours one. Now, the reason why this one came up was because one of my customers has an inquiry form, which is not a Marketo form. It's a CMS form, not native to Marketo, but it integrates straight into Marketo as a lead gen form. Unfortunately, it does not write to Marketo when the person filled in the form. It only shows the date. Now, because the contact centers have different opening hours, it was important to set the expectations and the service level agreements between my customer and their consumers by sending a different type of communication back to the consumer if they had messaged outside of office hours. So the example that we built up for them was, This is the one for the Sydney-based contact center. There was a variety of these built out depending on where they were in the world. And we would set the time for Australia, Sydney. We would confirm when the contact center was opened and closed. So in this case, it was 8:59 and closed 2 p.m. So any hours outside of the 8:59 to 1:59 p.m. were considered out of office hours. Having said that, we then said if they message or if this script is rendered in an email between those times, then tell them that one of our team members will contact them shortly. Otherwise, if the script is rendered outside of that time, then sorry, you've reached us outside of business hours and we'll get back to you shortly. We can easily test this now and say that office hours are between 8:59 and 1:59. In this example, we take the same seed list. And we'll see that everyone would be receiving exactly the same content because right now it's 11:23. So we are inside of the contact center's service hours. If we then go into the script and say that office hours ended at 11 o'clock, which was 23 minutes ago, and we hit save, in that same email, when we go to the next person, because we're now shut, you've reached us outside of business hours. So this was an automatic way of checking the time then and there when the inquiry happened to then render a specific response based on time of day. So this one is not basing anything on actual Marketo data. It's just rendering a different message based on date time stamping. So as mentioned before, scripting will only work on email assets and will render the exact content at the time that the email is sent. So with that in mind, it's very important with email scripting not to change data as the cohort is being sent. Otherwise, you risk different content being rendered, or at worst, you risk nothing being sent. And even worse than that is something being sent, but being all gobbledygook. I'll give you an example of that. So in this email, number 3, I've written a script in a way that would fail if it was sent. So in the preview, it all looks fine and dandy. Whereas when we go to look at a list of people, it tries to render by looking at the person's contact record, and it would end up looking something like this. So this won't, let me rewind a little bit. This will not let you approve the email if you were setting up the email now and trying to approve and close it. It will look at the script and go, no, I can't approve this. Unfortunately, the same is not true if the script was already approved and then someone made a change to the script. So if you've already got an email that's approved and then someone messes with the script, the email is still officially approved and will still be sent by the system, but it will look like this. So it's best always to do tests on live people. Now, live could just be a seed of email addresses that you are in control of, but also to ensure that any changes made to emails where scripting is used are thoroughly tested once again. So to go back to important notes about scripting, it can obviously be a very big boost to your marketing, but needs to be well thought out and governed to avoid those failures. Definitely extensive testing is needed and live sampling before any implementation. It can be very quickly affected by changes in the naming fields or the type of fields being read. So if your Salesforce administrator or your CRM Dynamics administrator shifts the way that that a field records data, it will have an immediate impact on scripting. As the content is instantly dynamic, it can be hard to track what the person received exactly. So if you send out an email this morning, and for like an example, that person who filled in an inquiry form gets a certain email at 8 a.m. because we're outside of contact center hours, and then they get another one for whatever reason at 4 p.m. within center hours, the email asset will be identical. So you won't be able to immediately see what they received because the content shifts on its way out of the system, not at a preview level. It's a very powerful tool in your arsenal for avoiding micro-segmentation rules or building out too many smart lists that will slow down the execution or your automations. So how to get started? Identify the use cases for your business where segmentations are too broad or the types of data are too various. Velocity scripting could be the missing link for you. If you're struggling to make rhyme or reason of your database and how it can be leveraged, we can help. Definitely come and ask us about our platform audits. Draw out the logic of communication on a piece of paper is great. So if a male is checked true, then address them as Mr. Otherwise, if female's checked true, then address as Miss. It can be a bit of an enigma at first. Feel free to speak to us if you have any velocity scripting questions, and indeed anything to do with MarTech related activities. And happy scripting.
Very good. Cool. Thank you, Mina. I've got a couple of quick questions for you and then a longer one that we might take at the end. So
Sure.
First question is maths or logic. Can we have greater than? What sort of operators are there inside of the scripting?
So the operators inside of the script do allow for some mathematical, I guess, equations. You can say less than equal to alternate values. You can also concatenate and cut values. So one of my users also generates passwords by taking their Salesforce account ID and only taking the first four digits, then adding on a standard ending. And in doing so, they are mathematically minusing or adding characters.
Yeah.
And there's a question about how do those hours work with time zones of velocity? Do they use the data center or the audience's local time? So you're setting, you are setting the time zone with velocity. Now it can be a bit tricky if you are trying to fool Marketo outside of its native time zone. So when we came to do the contact center opening hours in Asia for that customer, we had to add a bit more scripting in order to stop Marketo from trying to default to the instance's Marketo time zone. So the instance for that Marketo was all Los Angeles, the one that we were helping to build contact center scripting for. So naturally, when you set time zone, it automatically looks at the time zone of the instance. So to avoid doing that, we often have to build in extra lines of code in order to stop that and enforce a specific time zone.
Cool. Jolly good, jolly good. I will ask you to look at the first question, which came from Michael, actually, which is a longer question. I think we might need to handle it offline or if we run out of time. And that's more about how we sort of structure the whole thing and who gets to do what, because it's a really good question. Because what essentially, if you're not careful, if you allow velocity, in my opinion coming, if we're allowing, let's call them traditional marketers who might not be programmers, you're giving them basically a tool here that needs a little bit more corralling and a little bit more control. So you need to think about the roles and who's going to be able to do what. Because as Mina says, there's a few gotchas there, but the huge benefit is that what you're going to be doing is way more scalable, way more flexible, and it's really using the power that Marketo has inside of it. So we want you to use it, but there's just a few gotchas that you need to be careful of. That said, thank you, Mina. I'll ask you maybe to consider that question if we get a chance to answer it at the end, that we will. But now I'm going to ask JL to step up to the mic, and I'll do one quick poll before we go any further. So my question here for the audience is, are you using Marketo Forms today? So yes, most of the forms we're using are Marketo Forms, somewhat, but we might use another form solution, or no, we don't use Marketo Forms at all. So we've got I'll leave it another few seconds. Looks like the biggest majority is yes, most of our forms are Marketo Forms. And then 25% are no, we don't use. Oh, it's dropping. Whatever. Good news is it's fairly close. Let's just leave it that way. But still, there's enough people who are either somewhat or no, we don't use it. Thank you for that. At this point, I'll hand over to you, JL.
Thank you, Graham. Good. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah?
Yes, we can.
Cool. Beautiful. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be able to talk about forms with you today. I often have clients coming to me with a few questions asking me if they should be using Marketo Forms, if they are using it the right way, or if I have any tips to help them and make it a bit more pop, if you want, to pop a bit more. So I thought today I'd try and assemble a few features that I hope you'll find helpful. Some of them are quite basic. Others are a little bit more advanced. You might need to know a bit of HTML, but I hope at least that some of those features that I will show with you today will help you, will tease your brain and get you to start thinking creatively when you approach your Marketo Forms. So with this session today, I hope to give you a few tips which will help you to enhance the mobile layouts, optimize your error messages, and make the most of rich text labels and formatting them using a rich text editor, and then trying to find a creative approach to a gated content landing page using the known visitors feature and the advanced thank you page feature. Now, the first thing I'm going to cover is as a difficulty level or basic, it's very simple, and it's about skipping the labels and start using placeholders instead. The reason why this can be helpful is pretty much when your fields start stacking on top of each other on mobiles, and if you've got a lot of fields, you'd like to reduce the amount of scrolling. And one smart way of doing that is using placeholders instead of labels. And the other thing I'm going to cover here also is the custom validation messages. And I'm going to point the mobile phone number one also because a lot of people forget to update that message, and they usually show the US format instead of the Australian one. By using this feature, you will be able to maybe customize your message to be a little bit more helpful, a bit more contextual, and your audience will certainly appreciate that. So let me just jump into the form here. So the first thing to do is to get the placeholder set up. It's very simple. In Marketo Forms 2.0 terms, the placeholder is what they call the hint text. And if I just cut the label and paste it inside the hint text and remove a colon, you'll find that you just get a nice placeholder there. Okay. Very easy to set up, and as I said, it helps to reduce this vertical spacing in between fields, and it will, quite consciously improve the layout on mobile. The second feature I wanted to show is to do with the validation message. Some of you might not know it, but you can actually go in here where the validation message is written and click on the drop down and switch to custom instead of standard, and then start going in there and editing it. So but I personally think it's a pretty funky tool, and a lot of people don't spend the time trying to use it, but you can do so many nice thing and actually be quite witty with the way, and and improve the experience of your visitors with some funky error messages. The next one is to do with labels. So if you were to use labels, you could also improve them, improve the look and feel without the need to involve a designer or a developer. It's and it's quite, in this example here, it's quite also, I think, can be quite helpful for some people to have some visual cues rather than textual ones. For this one, I'm going to show you the actual form here. So this is the live page with these forms, with these icons. And if I go inside the form and click edit, you'll find a pretty basic form. And if you select the field, you'll find that next to the label, there's this little pencil icon there, and which often goes unnoticed. If you click on that, you're presented with your usual familiar WYSIWYG editor, your rich text editor, and there you can do everything you used to do in Word. And here I've just simply added an image from my resources folder and resized it, to the width I wanted, applied it, and saved. So this is very simple, a very simple way of improving, the look and feel of your form without having to spend big on getting a designer right. Mainly if you've got the taste and you've got the time to go and select those icons and upload them to your instance. That's a very nice feature to use. Now, this one is a little more advanced. And we will be using labels, but it's a different type of labels. What we are trying to do here is to replicate what this form does. These are actually your boring radio buttons, but we've changed them into a nice touch-friendly button with active states. And we've included images and descriptions within that same label. Okay, so obviously you will need someone who is good at HTML with that, and it will require a combination of HTML and updating the custom CSS of your form. I'm just going now to open the form to show you how it works. So first of all, I'll go back to the initial form and try and explain it, give you a better picture of how things are set up. So here's a series of radio buttons. Okay, we are not going to edit this label now. It's the values are also rendered as labels, and this is what we are going to update here. And if you go here and edit the values, you get your two columns with the display value and the stored value. Now, you still can't paste in your HTML here. Okay? And you need to go into the advanced editor in order to do that. And here it's very simple. As you can see, there's a vertical line separating the display value and the stored value. As long as you don't edit the value on the right, you're fine to add in your HTML and do something like this if I wanted to. Okay, save. And if I edit it again, we'll find that preserve the HTML. So this is the same approach we use here, but obviously in a little more complex way. So if we edit that here and switch to advanced view, you can see the paragraphs, the spans, the images, and then after placing, so restructuring the labels, we then went into the form settings and click on the little cog icon here and pasted our custom CSS. Okay. So this is a little bit more advanced, but it should give you, give you some ideas and to try and make your forms a little bit more funky, a little more engaging, and try to make them touch friendly now with the mobile devices that we have. Now, my last two features I'm going to cover are to do with gated content, and in this time, in difficult times, you will hear a lot of marketers or marketing experts saying that this is the time to go back to basics. Do not try to reinvent the wheel. And for us digital marketers and when it comes to lead generation, one of the most universal methods is to use this good old gated content page. But there's a good news, it doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't. So I hope the next two examples I'm going to share with you are going to give you a few more ideas on how to approach these. The first one I'm going to show you is how to offer different user experiences to known visitors and unknown visitors. And we're doing that by leveraging the if known feature of the form. So if I'm known and I click on the link, this is what I get. Because I'm already known to the system, you already got my details. I don't need to go through the whole step of putting in my details again. I can just go straight and download the white paper, which is fantastic. Okay, but if I'm unknown, this is what I get. Okay, I get the form being shown to me, and I need to still put in my details before I can actually download the white paper. As you can see here, it's the exact same URL, but showing different content. And I've used the intermediate level because it's not, even if it's you need a little bit of understanding of the logic, it's not that complicated. And that's thanks to the known HTML setup. So if I'll just go into the form here. And the known HTML setup is under the form settings tab. And settings. And it's the last field here under general. It's called the if known visitor show form. Or you can also ask it to show, I think I'm just going to switch back. I've just used the wrong form, I'm sorry. I'll just go there.
I like the way you tidied up after yourself there.
So I'm just going to edit the form. And as you see here, the custom, the if known visitor show custom HTML. And I find my little pencil icon again. When you click on this, you get a very familiar setup. If you guys are used or familiar with using tokens in emails and so on, this is quite straightforward. You can just add in your message, put in the on your first name. In my case, I just use the first name, but you can add in the last name and any other tokens that you can get from the field here. So, which is quite interesting. And I hope that this on top of the other features I showed you will get you to click on this little pencil icon every time you see it now inside the Marketo Forms editor. And finally, I'll show you how you can do something a little bit more fancy, a little bit of it's not really a gamification concept, but again, it's getting people, sending people to two different thank you pages. And here, what we're going to do is, if someone wants to register, subscribe to the July edition, they just put in their details and then just be redirected to a normal thank you page, which will tell them, okay, you'll receive your digital copy on the 15th of the month. But for the lucky person who has the actual code, that person will be able to go straight to a downloadable page and download the asset. And again, that's an intermediate setup because it's quite easy once you understand the logic. So this is my page here. Just putting in my details. and I'll leave this empty for the moment, and I'll click subscribe. And I get a nice thank you message, okay, as expected. If I click back and I do the same, and now I insert a coupon code which was sent to me. I'm redirected straight to the downloadable asset, and I can download it now. Okay, so that's and that's not very hard to set up. I'll show it to you right away. If you click on the form here, we'll go back under the form settings and settings again, but now we'll go under the thank you page section, and you see that little link there, which you know, almost doesn't look as nothing much, just look like a bit of text there. But if you click on this, you get the advanced thank you page setup. So here I've selected the field, and I've put in my condition if it contains the coupon value. Okay, you follow up with a page which leads you to the downloadable asset. If not, then direct them to the default thank you page. As you can see, it's quite simple once you put your head into it and understand how to set up the logic.
Nice.
So that's it for me today. I hope at least I did cover some aspects of the Marketo Forms, which will get you to revisit them and maybe take some time to click on some of those little hidden icons and links, and try and be a little bit more inventive or creative with the way you set them up. And if you are already looking into improving your forms, feel free to drop me a line and give me a call, and I'd love to hear from you and your ideas and see if we can provide a solution to you. Thank you very much.
Very good, Jael. Thank you. Thanks very much. We do actually have some questions, but I'm going to save them. Actually, I'm going to share one, which is not a question. It's actually from Michael. It says, "Wow, that's amazing. I did not know you could do that. Thank you." So I'll say that to both you guys. You've shared a whole heap of information in there. Hopefully you've taken away one or two things. We do have some other questions, but I will take them offline, and we'll probably send them in the follow-up email that's going out. To close the bit about forms, everything that Jael does and in his team is about the user experience. So yes, Marketo Forms, if you just use them like Marketo Forms straight out of the box and you don't really get your head around it, they can be a bit dull, let's put it that way, but they really don't need to be. So what's on the screen at the moment is one example of a Marketo form on the left that we use all the time. If someone's been in our training, you'll probably realize you get this. That's actually a Marketo form, but instead of a multi checkbox, it's using stars and flames and that sort of stuff. That's a bit of fun. But then you extend those forms into things like preference centers, and you extend those forms into things like real functional forms for doing renewals of insurance and a whole heap of other things that you can be using Marketo Forms for. The beautiful thing is it then remains within the Marketo world. So the marketing person is now responsible for maintaining that. You can change a field, you can add new fields in there, and you're not waiting on IT or somebody else in another dark room somewhere to actually modify all of those things for you. So Marketo is offering all of these capabilities. It's just sometimes you've got to unlock that. Now you know why we're calling it unlocked. So thank you. We are 6 minutes slightly overdue. As Jael said there, if there's anything we can help with for any follow-up here, or if you need any assistance with anything Marketo-wise or sales tech-wise as well, you know where we are. So thank you very much, and to both Mina and to Jael, we'll give a virtual round of applause. Thank you very much. It's kind of hard working in COVID and being in different offices, but I think we've managed to pull it off. So thanks very much, and have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.